Hi everyone, this is Kirsten on a Sunday evening with the broadcast about quantum physics. And it's not me who is going to be the expert on that. I invited an engineer to come and join me because he has been so fascinated by quantum physics that he wrote a whole book about it called You Can Create Your Life. And the subtitle is I have it here in English because it's quite interesting. He claims you can create your life and quantum physics explains how. So I thought, well, let's hear all about how quantum physics makes us able to create our lives. And here he is, Henning. Good to see you. Hi. Can you hear me well and everything?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
Wonderful
Thanks.
to see you, and thank you so much for joining me and your willingness to explain a little bit to us about quantum physics, because I find it's actually a paradox. We've had quantum physics in the world for how many years? 80 years?
100 years, yeah.
100 years.
Yeah.
And we still don't get it.
No, it is pretty complicated, but thanks a lot for inviting me, and I'm happy to join you. So yeah, it's so quantum physics has given us another insight to how things are actually built. So if I should just give you a pretty short introduction, then back in 1600, Newton, he came up with a model of how to. He could tell how the sun and everything were orbiting, and how the Earth was orbiting around the sun and so forth. So that worked really well, and that worked for a long time, but in 1900, around 1920, Einstein and Niels Bohr and other scientists, they came up with the idea that everything was built of atoms. So they found out that the atoms are actually, if you think about an atom, then you have a nucleus, right? And you have these electrons orbiting around it. So they found out that what they are built of, these particles making up the nucleus and the electron, is just energy. So it's like a vortex of energy. So if you think about it, on the American prairie, you would see tornadoes come along, right? The only reason you can actually see them with your bare eyes is because they take up dirt, and that makes them visible. So if you think about these vortexes going through a clean room, then you will not be able to see them, but you cannot penetrate them anyhow. So that's why when we touch things like the computer and the table I'm standing with here, we believe it's solid material, but there's no solid material. There's only this energy in motion. But our perception is that it feels solid, so that's how we interpret it. Does that make sense? So that's a big difference. So actually, quantum physics has learned us that everything holds is made of energy, right? So it holds a frequency. So we talk about resonance frequency, and so everything has their own frequency, so to speak. And that's the big difference from the classical physics that said energy is only when you're moving, or if you're high up, then you have energy, right? But now we know that everything is made of energy.
It's such a big paradigm shift that it's difficult for the brain to understand. That it's difficult for the mind to comprehend, because it's turning things upside down. To say that we are not just passive observers of energy that moves from A to B or from upwards to downwards. We are also in the middle of energy. We are actually part of the energy.
That's right. Yeah. So everything is built of energy, and when you have a thought, you will emit these electromagnetic waves. And that's why you can say that, and also from our heart, when you have a feeling, you can actually measure these electromagnetic waves. So that explains how I can feel somebody else. So when you drop two stones in a pond, then the waves will actually interfere. So when I is thinking about something, or I have a feeling, somebody else will actually be able to measure it and to understand what it is actually. Am I spreading love, or am I angry? They can actually measure it from the frequency of the waves that I'm emitting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but are we actually able to measure that at this point?
Yeah, because the first ones doing this was actually Valerie Hunt from UCLA and William Tiller from Stanford. They were the first ones to measure this electromagnetic field. So when you think about it, you all, for every thought you have, you're emitting these waves, and also for every feeling. So that makes up a whole electromagnetic field around us, just like the Earth holds this electromagnetic field. We had the same. So it's like a sphere of energy. And so therefore we are able to feel each other, to make, we can actually, you can say that the easiest way is the mom and her newborn child. They don't need to be in the same room to be able to know how each other are doing. So immediately when the mom gets upset, the baby will know. Because the thing is that they, having almost identical DNA, then they will touch what I call the spider web, and that will be, picked up by the other. So the baby can actually sense the mother, and the other way around. So
depending on how sensitive the mother is.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me explain. The thing is that it's actually the DNA that determines the frequency of the carrying wave that we send out on. So these biophotons, they are released for every process in the body, and the frequency of these biophotons, they depend on your DNA. That's why two identical twins, they will easily know how the other is feeling, even though they are on opposite sides of the world.
So you are such an expert, so I need to wind down the tempo of science here, because just to make sure we understand, because now I really want to understand quantum physics. It's been 100 years, and I know that it took 100 years for us to get that the world is not flat, it is round.
Yeah.
And now we have spent 100 years talking about quantum physics and measuring and this, that, and the other. We need to get it now.
Yeah.
Because it's actually, why is it important? Why do you think it's important that we get it? That we understand it now?
Because it explains to us why things are working the way they are. So if we believe in solid material, that's not existing. We know that now. So that's why the way that Descartes and Newton, they actually defined the world, we can say that's not valid anymore. They did a lot of good work, we invented a lot of things during all those 100 years. But now that we know that everything is made of energy, we need to, put that into our minds, so to speak, to be able to make use of it.
Yeah, and the reason why I think it's important is because when we act without this knowledge, we lead ourselves in ways that are not necessarily good for us or good for others, when we are not aware of the power of a thought, the power of an emotion, the power of our beliefs, the power of our inner leadership, how that affects the outer world.
Yeah.
How our inner climate affects the outer climate. So we need to understand it now, because if we really understand how we can take this inner leadership based on science, modern science, we can it's much easier for us to affect not only our own inner world, but also the outer world. And we have a world that is in despair. So it's time to get this.
Yeah, well, I think I'll wind back a little, and because what's important for a leader to understand is that the team that he's leading, the sum of the people in that team, it's actually the sum of the energy. So when you have somebody who's in one way or the other down, you need to get that team member up and running full speed, because he will drag down the rest of the team physically, you can say, because of that energy. But let me just wind one step back then, because what I want you to know is that the way we see the world now, in my book, I have this picture of how, from the European Space Agency, and they draw like a spider web. So when you think about quantum physics, they explain us how everything is built. if you think about a spider web that's flat out like a sheet, right? This spider web comes in steps. So that's why it's called quantum, because you cannot stand between. It's like a stairs, right? You can only step on the stairs. You cannot be in between. So that's why it's called quantum physics. You have these layers of energy like that. So and that's why I call it a spider web. When I touch that spider web, everybody will sense it. And that's why we can say that we are much more connected than we are aware of. So when I have a thought, I will send out energy, and that spider web will actually vibrate. So when a spider is sitting in its spider web, and there's a small vibration, it knows that there's something to eat. You can actually say, when I have a thought or a feeling, I will touch the spider web in the same way. So everybody who is listening in, they will be able to sense me. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So I have to have an example from I was living in LA. I went to college, and two girls, they, twins, right? Identical twins. One girl went up to Canada, and the other girl was in LA. And I heard then that the girl who went to Canada, she was killed in a car accident at night. So when I talked to the other girl, her twin sister, afterwards, she told me at the time of the accident, she woke up and knew that something happened to her sister. Now, Canada and LA is pretty far away, but the thing is, when the experience she has right before she's killed in this accident, she will burst out energy. Even though her sister was sleeping, she would actually sense that information, because in terms of DNA, they're very identical, right? So she will not have to tune in, so to speak. She will just feel it. So I think this is very important to understand this difference, because Einstein in the beginning said, okay, there's nothing that can be transported faster than the speed of light. But Niels Bohr and other people did not agree with him. So he actually said later on in his career, okay, I accept that there's something that actually can send information real time. He called it spooky action at a distance. And that's why we can say that there's a great difference between light and sound that takes time to move, right? But when you send out the energy we talk about here from our heart and brain, they touch the spider web that everything is built of. And that's why information is transported like in real time.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I think we're not aware how connected we really are, because the thing is, you can tune in to the frequency of other people just by thinking of them. So as I said, identical twins, they don't have to tune in because they have the same DNA. They're operating in the same frequency. Mother and child also in the beginning. But also when people, they live together a whole life and they turn 80, they hardly have to talk anymore, because they can just feel and know what the other is about to say.
Mm.
And I think now that we can explain why it is like this, I think it's very important that we use this in our everyday leadership and whatever we do, that we understand that you cannot do anything that will not, has an effect on everybody else.
Mm. Yeah, and the way you think about them affects them. So if I sit here and think a negative thought about you, you will feel it. You will pick it up somehow in your energy field, and that will affect you.
Yeah.
And if I think an uplifting thought about you, that will affect you too, right?
Yeah. So when you tune into people, it's like turning the dial on your radio. When you tune into people, you're able to actually to feel how they're doing. But one other important thing is that when you think negatively about me, so say that we have a situation like that, remember that the chemistry you're releasing into your body and also the frequency around you will touch you first, so to speak. So you cannot think about others and don't be affected yourself, because we know that when you have feelings like hatred and guilt and stress and so forth, then you release chemistry into your body that actually provides what do you call it? The environment for the cells is hard, so they have a hard time doing what they need to do because of the chemistry in the blood. But when you are in love and you feel loved by the people around you, then you have a complete different set of chemistry in your body, which your cells can thrive on. So as soon as I, think about somebody else that I dislike and it makes me mad, it's actually I'm hitting myself first with this chemistry and the electrical field.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So one more reason to forgive each other and love each other and all that, because it affects ourselves too.
Yeah, and foremost, because you're the one having the thought. That's why you're emitting those waves, and you're also emitting the chemistry into your body. And the funny thing is, Arlene McCusick, she has, and other people also, they have measured on these waves. So when you have a negative thought, the frequency is lower. That means low energy. We know that from Planck and others. So we know that a lower frequency provides less energy. Now, when you are, feeling down or you're stressed or anything like that, you have these lower frequencies. But also, when you are in love, you have a fine wave like this. But when you are stressed, it's kind of like shaking like this. So that provides a field around you that is shaking like that, and that's your cells can actually not operate correctly when they have this information field around them because they're drawing from this information field. Does that make sense? That we can actually measure the difference in the frequency and also if it's harmonic or not. So we talk about harmonic waves. That's when you are in love and you feel loved and so forth. But when you feel hate or you're stressed, then the electromagnetic field that you create is actually shaking like that. So there's a big difference.
Fascinating. Yeah, that is fascinating because it's fascinating because we used to come from an era where we actually thought stressed people or busy people was equal productive people and good leaders. We thought the more hardcore, the more productive, the more they work, the better. But we see now that if you create a tense environment with high performance goals and create a stressful environment, what you're saying is that's not good for the...
That's not good at all.
No.
Because the thing is that both the chemistry release, as I talked about, and also the electrical field around you will actually go down in frequency. So
you'll lower the vibration.
Yeah, the vibration, right? Yeah. You lower the vibration, both the frequency and also it will go from harmonic to inharmonic. And that really has an effect on your cells.
So what I understand there, so the best thing a leader can do is to feel super good about him or herself, to be well in one's own energy field, and to have cleansed his or her own system from grief, bitterness, hatred, all the emotions that can lower and affect negatively.
Yeah,
right?
That's correct. So you can see it like this. So we can actually measure when somebody has a trauma. The energy needs to flow regularly in your body in order to stay healthy. Now, when something happens to you, you can actually measure a standing wave in your field, in your energy field. So now, when you actually go into this trauma and have it released, you can measure that the standing wave is released. So your energy starts to flow again. And that's why it's important that we should definitely, take into account how we're feeling, and negative thoughts and feelings should be dealt with. We cannot just say, okay, I'm just gonna, ignore them, because there's no way we cannot run from them. No, that's not possible at all, because we know that we can measure these traumas that you have during your life is actually part of your energy field. So when you go into to look at it, and if you talk to your best friends or you go into professional counseling or whatever, then you can actually release those traumas, and that's depletes you from energy. So it's very important that you don't have these in your energy field.
Yeah, and speaking of that, if a leader, now I'm talking a lot about leadership, and I want to say to all of you that I believe leadership today is not only for formal leaders. There is a huge, enormous need for informal leaders to step up and take leadership. So I'm not talking only to the formal leaders, but as leaders today, what we see, if we look at the landscape of leaders, we see that actually many become leaders out of a trauma of not feeling heard or seen by their parents, and wanting to get the attention and wanting to succeed and wanting somebody to love them and somebody to tell them they're good enough. So they become high performers, even over performers, and climb the career ladder and maybe become these big leaders. But what sits on the chair, on the leader's chair, is a wounded child.
Yeah. The thing is,
deeply traumatic child emanating that kind of energy. So can you speak a little bit about how that affects if a traumatic person is leading?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I've done a lot about this, to evolve the things that happened to me as a child, because I knew instantly when I looked into this that I wanted to get rid of those those experiences, right? So what happens is that you can say when a child has a trauma, it's experiencing a trauma, then what happens is you can say that it stops aging, right? In a sense, you kind of like keep your little child as a 5-year-old. If it experiences a trauma, it stays there as a 5-year-old. So sometimes you will behave like a 5-year-old, because when you go into that state, then you are still a 5-year-old, because you were not able to evolve from there in that particular area. Does that make sense? So we know that we should actually handle these traumas and in order to release them, because then you can say that you can grow fully in all parts of you, so to speak. But I think one thing, a very important experiment that they made in the US, is that they took a group of people, and they went in, they were sitting in the cinema, right? So they were showing them a movie. Now, they would put in pictures so fast that the eye was not able to see the picture. But somehow they were able to manipulate when the people went out afterwards, after having seen the movie. They could actually manipulate the way that they would choose what to eat and what to drink and what to do when they came out. So they were presented to different things, right? So depending on what kind of pictures that they set in the movie so quickly that you didn't see it, but you had actually, you must have been aware of it somehow. So they found out that the way your heart operates, what I call intuition, you were able to register these pictures from your heart, you can say, what I call intuition. So you were not aware of it because you hadn't seen the picture. It was so quickly that you didn't see it. So what they found out is that your heart is actually able to scan a lot more than your brain is. So you can say that your heart is able to make a decision 5 seconds before your brain is able to make a choice. So the way they did it was they need to find out how quickly can I show the picture and you're still noticing it with your intuition, your unconsciousness, right? But you didn't see it physically. So they found out, 1 million times faster can the heart and the whole heart and gut area actually register data compared to the mind. So if you think about that, then when you feel something, you have a gut feeling, you feel something, it's actually based on a larger amount of data, because you were able to scan a lot more compared to your brain.
But how do we know that it wasn't the brain that registered these pictures?
Because they were measuring on these people and they could tell that you didn't see it. So the brain didn't get any information through your eyes, right?
Okay. So it must have landed somewhere else in the system.
And now we know that every cell has an antenna. So it's able to communicate with your other cells in order for the processes in the body to happen in the right order, right? But these antennas also takes out is also able to measure signals coming from the outside. So that's why they ended up saying that you can see your subconscious mind as able to process up to data up to 1 million times faster than your brain. So what we call a gut feeling or intuition or whatever we want to call it, it is actually measurable. That this is further is far more effective because it can scan a lot more data. As an engineer, I know the amount of data you can use before you make a decision is very important, right?
Absolutely. And did you say that it was possible to program these people's behavior based on the information that was given to them?
Yeah. So actually, the pictures that they would present to these, they made people make decisions though they had never seen the pictures, but they had registered. The subconscious mind has actually registered the pictures.
So this brings me to leadership, because this, what you're telling there, shows how easily we can be manipulated by others, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what you're saying? If someone wants to manipulate, it is so easy.
Yeah. But I think another very important for, as a leader, is that you can actually say when you're able to make decisions using your heart, using your intuition, you're making decisions based on a much larger amount of data. Does that make sense? So
if you have a gut feeling, it's more valuable than if you have a thought.
The thing is that sometimes, you have a feeling, oh, that's what we're going to do. And then your brain kicks in 5 seconds later and says, oh, that's not going to do, you can do that, that's not. And then you follow your brain, your logic, right? But then you end up finding out, I should have gone with my gut feeling, because that would be a lot better. And no doubt, because if you have 1 million more data to make your decision on, then that's, that's more exact, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what you're saying is, your recommendation is to follow the intuition and the heart, because it is more wise. It has more access to. It has more access to data than the mind. So the mind is actually, what do we use the mind for then?
Well, the mind is excellent when you want to learn new stuff, and you want. So there's a lot of things that we need our brains to do. But in decision making, we actually make sure that your heart is involved, because it's a lot better of scanning the area, and so it bases its decision on more data. That's the point of this experiment that they made.
Which brings me to what I experience often is in my leadership training. I what I do for a living is that I create communities around 21st century leadership. So gather people who are committed to leading the future, to influence the future, and then giving them tools and inspiration and help to shift their level and lead on a completely new level. Because I really like what Einstein said: we cannot solve problems on the same level they were created. So we all need to change the level if we want to solve our problems. This is what I do, and this is what I often experience. And I'd like to hear what you think about this. I often experience that people feel very drawn to the training. They really want to get to a different level. They really want to fold out in full selves. I talk about, we need not only the masculine muscles, we need the feminine muscles, and people really want to be whole people. They really want to transform from career to calling. That check, they want that too. They really want to learn about all these new paradigm things, so they really want to, but they are held back by something that you might explain but they are held back by fear. Because what happens to them is that their heart's calling, but then the mind says, no, that's too much money, or that's too much time, or that's inconvenient, or da 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 da. So can you talk a little bit about how this mechanism, that fear is somehow, if we're not aware, is running the system.
Yeah, that's right.
Keeping us from what we really want. The heart really wants to. So this was just an example because I see it all the time.
Yeah.
But it could be something else also. It could be, going for that dream job, or going for, that relationship that you really, really want, but then you like hold yourself back. It could be anything. So I was just using my training as an example. But what is this mechanism?
Yeah, it's really important to understand this, I think, because I think Bruce Lipton describes this really, really well. Because what we talk about is this behavior, so that we have built-in behavior, so to speak. Because what happens when you are age 0 to 7, you only have delta and theta brainwaves. That means that you take in everything as truth in your story, right? That's why we end up doing as our parents and the people around us when we grow up. So these patterns that we have, we will act according to these patterns as we grow up. So if we have, patterns that maybe we grew up with parents that were, afraid of something, and then they gave us fear, so to speak. If we continue on with that, we will actually act in fear. So these patterns are given to us throughout life, right? And it can also be our own way of doing things that can give us these patterns, because when we keep doing things in that same way, it will end up as a pattern. So to understand this, so if we say that 5% of the time we can stay conscious. So if I consciously want to achieve this, I will go for it. Let's say I want to buy some great food because I want to lose weight. So that's consciously, I want to do that. So I go ahead and buy it. The thing is, 95% of the time, the programs in your subconscious will actually run your life. So I have an example. So if you drive, you're driving along the freeway, and suddenly I went too far. I should have been, off right here. And then you find out that it was actually not you driving the car, because you were thinking back in time, or you were planning what to do next. So your subconscious mind was driving the car. So if we want to know where the subconscious mind is taking us, 95% of the time, then we need to know what kind of programs we're running in. So that's why we need to look inside and find out what has actually been programmed. And I think when we become aware of how we act, and we say, I don't want to act like that again. Why did I actually act like that again? I told myself I didn't want to. But it's not a matter of what you're telling yourself. You actually need to clear out these programs that you no longer want to create your life through. And we only have 5% of the time where we are conscious. So if we want, what I think is very important is to align the conscious mind with the subconscious mind, so they actually go in the same direction. Because then we can achieve what we consciously set as the goals in our lives.
And how do we do that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what we need to do is actually kind of like look at ourselves from the outside and say, okay, I'm acting like that. That could be the way your mom or dad acted, and you don't want to act like that. Then you need to change that. You need to be aware and clear out that program. And the only way you can do that is by adding another program. So let's say that I have a low self-esteem, for instance. That's how I've been raised, having a low self-esteem. So I need to change that in order not to act out like having a low self-esteem. So how do I actually raise my self-esteem? I do that by loving myself, by keep telling myself, that I love myself the way I am, and so forth. Because when you keep loving yourself and keep telling yourself that you're good enough and do things for yourself, because then you will end up acting like that also unconsciously. So let's just take an example. When you need to learn to bicycle, right? You get the bicycle and it's hard, it's difficult. You have to really concentrate. But at some point you have learned to bike, so then you can start playing with your friends when you bike around. You don't think about biking. It's just part of your programs. So in the same way, when we train our body to know that we love ourselves and the way we want to do things, then it'll take it in. So they say that after 21 days having repeatedly done things in a certain way, then that will be, so to speak, be part of your subconscious, and it will be a running program within you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then it also speaks to this fact that we have to lead ourselves from the inside out, because what many people do is that they look at the outside. Yeah. So for example, they look at their bank account, or they don't have a partner, or they don't live in their dream house. So they look on the outside, and then they conclude something about themselves. That's because I'm not good enough. That's because I'm not lovable. That's because I don't think big enough, or whatever. So we need to understand this. I think is a very important lesson from quantum physics, is that it's the other way around.
Yeah.
First you think abundantly and lovingly and big, and then it shows up in the outside, right?
Yeah, it's created from the inside out, and great philosophers have said that 1,000 years ago. So in the ancient Greek and so forth, they said you create from inside out. And that makes perfectly sense the way I understand quantum physics. So I think we need to know that loving ourselves is the most important thing that we can do. Because loving ourselves, when you have loving thoughts about yourself or anybody else for that sake, then you release the best chemistry, dopamine and oxytocin and different kinds of chemicals we released into your body. And these are growth hormones that makes you stronger and makes you more healthy. And it boosts your immune system and so forth, just by thinking positively and feeling positively about yourself. Also, the feel around you, as I told before, that's actually enhanced both in vibration frequency and also in this harmonic way. So you have a much better information field around you, so to speak. So does that answer your question? That's why I think loving ourselves is the most important thing that we can do. And how do I love myself? And is it too egoistic to love myself? Can I do that? But I'm not talking about loving myself by putting others down. I'm only talking about loving the human being I am. And how do I do it? Well, first of all, you need to just state positively things about yourself, right? So think positively. And also you need to do what you like to do, because that shows you that you worship yourself when you do things you like. And then the most important thing, the third thing, is stop criticizing yourself, because that releases the chemistry you don't want in your body, and also it depletes your energy field from energy. So these three things, I think, we need to love ourselves for the person we are. We need to do things that we love to do, and then we need to stop criticizing ourselves. So that has made a tremendous effect on my life, so to speak, because I haven't learned otherwise when I grew up, and that's why I find out that doing this, it turned my world upside down. It changes everything.
It's absolutely my experience as well. It's a fundamental shift. And we think we do the world a service when we are hard on ourselves and beat ourselves up. We think that will make us better because we learned that at school. We come from such a lineage of people who were punishing us and leading by fear and management by fear. So we are so traumatized, but we are also the ones living with ourselves. So I'm the only one who's there for me all my life. You're the only one who's there for you all your life. So we can do a lot of work for ourselves, within ourselves. But it brings me to this. I'm very fascinated by fear, because I feel that fear is the antidote. It's like it's the difference. It's the opposite of love. And we are so driven by fear in this culture. Fear of not being good enough, fear of not being rich enough, fear of not being healthy enough, fear of death. Fear of, we're just freaking afraid all the time.
And also fear about not doing a great job. Your boss will say, this is not good enough. We have this fear. Do we actually perform the way that we expected? So there's a lot of things I think that's important to know about fear. So when we look at it from a physiological point of view, right? When you have fear, you release these hormones that actually narrows your blood vessels to your inner organs, and that's your immune system. And this is actually intelligent design, because when you're in fear, your body will say, okay, we need to fight or flight. So what happens is that all your blood goes to your arms and your legs, so you're able to fight or to run away, right? So you can say, if you live in stress, then you don't nurture your inner organs. They don't get the blood they need, because cells are always, reproduced, and they need this the blood with all these nutritions in order to what do you call it, to make new cells, right? So living in fear actually is hard on your physical body due to that. And also, as I said before, when your electrical field around you will be low in frequency, as well as have this vibrating in harmonic balance. You can actually say when you're anxious, when you're afraid, you can actually feel that you're shaking. Some people are physically shaking. And I fully understand that, because that's due to this shaking energy. The cells you give yourself an electrical field to live in that is actually in harmonic like this. So fear really has an impact on our body.
Absolutely, and I guess also on our decisions.
Yeah, because what they say that the also again, it's actually it actually has an impact on how your brain is used, because you go back to your reptile brain, and so you won't be as you will not be able to think consciously in the same way, because the blood is forced elsewhere, so to speak.
So we have to be aware of that, especially as leaders, because we are influencing so many people as leaders, but also as the leader in the family, the leader in the relationship. We are leaders everywhere we go, and we can really choose from which direction we lead ourselves.
I think one thing that's very important, I think, is that as a dad, when I tell somebody something to my son or my daughter, I need to be aware of what am I actually feeling and thinking. Because if I tell them something else that is against what I'm feeling, they feel immediately how I'm feeling. So if I tell them something else, then they would learn that, okay, I don't need to be aware of my feelings, because I can tell my dad is doing opposite of what he's feeling. Does that make sense? So if I say something but I'm feeling differently, then I learn that my children, that they should not take their feelings into account. And that's not, as we know now, that the way we feel, we can with our heart and intuition, we can scan a lot more data. So we need to learn our children to really believe in their heart and their intuition and their gut feeling.
That is a very important message. Also, this alignment between thought and emotion and action. For many people, it's misaligned. I have a thought, but I feel differently and I act completely differently. So it's like misalignment.
Yeah.
And no wonder people get confused and something doesn't work, because this misalignment is it's like having a ripple effect, right?
That's right.
Yeah, energetically, I would say.
But I think, as I see it, my heart is more steady in the way that it tells me to go this way. My brain will change all the time. So if I want to follow my brain, I will have to change direction all the time. But when I get an alignment between my conscious and subconscious minds, then I will act, more as a whole person.
Yeah, everything would be aligned. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find this is a very important piece of information for leaders, because leaders are often pressured by outside demands. So and so much, you need to make so and so much more next month. You need to get this company into, all this outside pressure, and it requires quite some leadership to not be too influenced by that, because that's also energy coming at you, right, as pressure.
Yeah.
So what could you give as advice for a leader who wants to be aware of quantum physics and deal with pressure from the outside?
Yeah. I think it's so important to learn to take notes of what you're feeling and in your intuition, your gut feeling, because it's there's no doubt that it's based on a lot more data. So if you want to make the right decision, you should also always take your heart into account and what you're feeling about that decision that you're making.
And a lot of times that's difficult, because if you're traumatized, you have closed down your heart.
Yeah.
So many people don't live with an open, free heart that's free to feel what it feels. They live with, it used to be open, but then it closed of bitterness and sorrow and grief and anger and da-da-da-da. So it's not super open.
No.
So there's a job to do to open the heart. And that's an inner job, as far as I have experienced. That nobody can do that for you. You can get help to do it, but there's a very big difference. I feel I experience a lot of people who can't really say, I don't really know what I want. I don't really know what I feel, because there's so many layers of trauma over the heart. So it's difficult to get access to the heart.
But I think the problem is that if we're really thinking everything and you're overthinking, right, then we never go down. We're not aware of what our heart is telling us. So you can say, when you're stressed, you're up in your mind and you're trying to make everything work, right? But the problem is, your heart has gathered a lot of information, and that information is actually available to you. But when you're in your head all the time, the subconscious mind says, "Oh, he's not ready to get this information." But when you, for instance, you're taking a shower in the morning and you say, "Oh, now I know how to solve this." But that's of course, this is actually given to you by your subconscious. So when your subconscious mind registers that your brain is capable of more information, it'll release small packages that you then can be aware of. So it has been working on a solution for a long time. And when you are ready to receive it, it can release the information and you can say, this is how I fix it. Or you can wake up in the morning and say, now I know what to do. And that, I fully understand that, because it's not your brain that's been working on a solution. It's your heart. This whole area has taken in, a lot more data. So it has solved things for you. But you need to be in a situation where you're not stressed and so forth. So that's why meditation, yoga, being, walking in nature and so forth are very important, because that relaxes our brain. We need to relax our brain to be able to make use of all the information that's actually capable, that our subconscious mind is capable of giving us.
Yeah, I find that's a very interesting paradigm shift, because leaders used to be people who worked a lot and took very few breaks. And I have this mantra: achieve more with less, because I feel that if we introduce the feminine, the feminine gear, the yin gear, and take that just as seriously as the yang gear, the action gear, if we use the clutch a little bit more, so these two gears can work better together, and so we actually can run and have an idea and get a problem to solve, but then we can receive it in the pause, in the break, while we're sleeping or while we're cooking or something else, instead of just thinking we have to race to get there. I think it's a very important paradigm shift, and we can see that the old ways of working are not really working, because we're destroying our planet. It's not really working, the old way of doing things. So we need to shift and do something different. And I love that you come with some scientifically based information on or research-based insights on how can we do things differently, and we certainly need to give ourselves a break.
Yeah, I
so
think
we can think with the heart.
Yeah, definitely. So the thing is, the more stressed we get, the less connection we have to our heart. So actually, there's been a lot of what do you call it? They looked a lot into the heart, how it's functioning, right? So they found that there's a little brain in the heart. So an area of the heart has neurons like the brain. It is capable of remembering things, and it's also capable of making decisions because it has its own little brain. They call it the little brain in the heart, and of course it's connected. And also there's this connection between the heart and the gut. So a feeling that starts in the gut will inform the brain of what's going on. So it's of course both ways. Your brain can tell how to feel, and other way around. Your brain can be affected, but about the feeling that you have in your stomach. But that you can find neurons in your heart. Neurons are the ones that makes up our brain, right? We also have these neurons in our heart.
And in our guts, right? We have neurons everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. In that whole area. I always call it the heart, but it's actually the solar plexus, the heart, and the gut. So this whole area is what you measure these waves. And I think it's another important thing is to be aware that the amplitude of the waves that's coming out from your heart is 60 times stronger than the amplitude of the wave from your brain. So Heart Math Institute, they measured this, that when you have a feeling, it's a lot stronger than when you have a thought. So you can say your heart is what do you call it? It's the key provider of the electrical field that I'm talking about. And we know when somebody has a heart attack, we started with electricity because it's electrical organ. So there's no doubt that this electricity is flowing in the body, and we know that when electricity is flowing, there's created a field of electromagnetic field is created.
So, with this knowledge, can we control our lives, or can we create our lives? What is the line?
Yeah, as my book is called "You Create Your Life." Quantum physics explains how. And the reason that I say that we create our life is that we create the chemistry that our cells have to live in. We create the electrical field around us. So I think we create much more than we are aware of. Of course, things can happen and come in from, suddenly things emerge in your life and you have to deal with it. But I would say we create our life mostly from the being we are, from what we are thinking and feeling. I think, Michael Jackson sings "Start with the Man in the Mirror," and that makes perfect sense. If I should explain how, so let's say that I get angry. So when somebody makes me angry, I could scream at him and then, fight back, right? But actually now I know that when somebody makes me angry, I actually know, okay, thank you for showing me that I hold anger within, because you cannot make me angry unless I hold anger. And that follows from classical physics. It's called constructive interference. Okay, so we know that everything has a frequency because everything is made of energy. So when I have emitting some waves, and there's also waves coming in, right? When I actually if the anger of somebody else that is reaching me, right, then constructive interference says that the wave will build up stronger. So when somebody makes me angry, I know I hold anger within, because I wouldn't pay attention to it if I didn't have that inner feeling. So now I know that I can actually take care of that and say, okay, I know I hold anger. I don't want to hold anger within because I know that's not good for my body. So I can deal with the anger that I have by talking to the neighbor or whoever, makes me angry. I need to find out what it is, because seldom it's the person who makes you angry that is causing the anger. He's just making, so he makes you aware of the anger you hold within. Does that make
by
sense?
triggering it, being the trigger. And actually, we would say now that it's probably trauma that has created the anger, and so the trigger is bringing the trauma to life, and then it's an opportunity to heal the trauma because now we know it's there.
Yeah, because usually we build up anger over time, and then suddenly it's triggered, and then we need to take care of it and have it released from our body.
But you were also talking about how we're all part of this spider web, right?
Yeah.
And so we affect each other in different ways, and we can, as leaders, be more mindful of how do I affect the bigger web that I'm part of, and with all this energy flowing between people. So I would say a good thing for leaders is to start learning to learn how to work with energy. How to work with energy. That would be a very good leadership skill.
Yeah.
To be able to affect the energy in different ways. So that's part of my leadership training. Because I think it's important that we can. I think it's a shortcut when we work energetically. We can affect, and it's much faster than words and long memos and da 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 da. When we work energetically, we can make things work. But there's another thing I would like to address, because when you say you can create your life, I find it's important to also allow room for the great mystery. Because, and I say that because I lived from this philosophy from very early on. I've actually been one of the people who has been very enthusiastic about this idea. We are co-creators of our reality. We have so much more say over our reality than we think. We can affect our reality so much more. And then I'm one of those people who experienced that something came in from that I had never thought would happen to me. But my 6-year-old son was diagnosed with an incurable disease. And even though I did everything in my power to heal him, and he was healed from the disease, he died at 7 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
And so the first thing that happened to me, and I say this because it could be that other people have experienced something similar. The first thing I thought, because I knew of this theory, you create your own life, was, oh my goddess, what did I create? And I had people around me in the New Age community who said, I can't believe you create things like that. I mean, why would you create such a drama? I was even, exposed at my colleagues' courses. One of my colleagues, she taught a course called You Can Create Your Life. And I was like, yeah, see what can happen if you don't master this. Then, you can experience tragedy like that. So I spent a lot of time feeling guilty and thinking, how did this happen? How did my own child get sick? And so sick that he died from it in under 6 months. And how did I have that? How did I attract that to me? How did I manifest this? And I remember looking up experts from all over the world and listening to what they have to say about that. And I don't know if you want to have a go. What would you say in a situation like that?
Yeah, well, I think we are born with a lot of things. So we know that people at age 3, they can actually play the piano like Mozart. So we are born with things, that we are capable of doing. Now, in that, quantum physics cannot explain any of what I'm saying now, but this is my belief, so to speak. So I believe we come in here in this world with a reason. What they call karma must exist in my way of looking at the world. But quantum physics cannot tell me anything about this. But this is what I truly believe. So when we enter this world, we have a chance to evolve from the things that we start out on the platform, right? And then we can evolve. And I think things like you're mentioning there with your son. Of course, that's a very tough situation to be in. But for some reason, I think that this must have been so to speak, plan that you are capable of handling, and he came into this world in order to learn something from that. I mean, there's no other way for me to interpret it. I think karma is actually part of our world, though we cannot say anything about it from a scientific point of view.
Yeah, but you're right that it's interesting to study, and I mean, I think science is also looking at how can a 3-year-old play professional piano. I mean, how is it technically possible?
Yeah.
And it does show us that we must come with something. We're not blank pages when we arrive. We have more than our DNA. We have something. And now I go into this field of mystery that also Einstein and Niels Bohr, there was a point where they also had to touch upon the mystery, because the science can explain so much, and we are so have been. I mean, you can hear it just in the past 20 years. So much research has come out in this field, because now we can measure the brain, we can measure the feet, we can measure the heart, we can measure everything, and then there's a mystery. And I believe that we have a soul, and that it also has a frequency. And it also has this whole system you were talking about is repeated in the soul. Yeah. The soul, and I think if we talk vibration, the heart is a stronger vibration than the mind, but I think the soul is the strongest vibration.
Yeah, but I think for me, the way I see things, the heart is connected to your soul. So you need your soul to bring life to your body. So your body is made out of like the same atoms that this table is made out of. So what brings life to it? You know, it's not the cells themselves, and it's not the atoms themselves, because there's not any different from the cells in this table or in my phone or anywhere else. There must be something that brings life to our atoms and our cells, right? And I think that's the soul. I know that cells has this antenna. So to me, my soul is sending on a specific frequency that my cells pick up due to the unique DNA. So you can look at it as if you buy an ordinary old-fashioned TV, it will show you can have an experience on the TV set, because it's taking down this frequency. So when you can turn the dial and have different experiences, right? But if the TV set is broke, or it doesn't work anymore, then you can no longer have an experience looking at the TV. But when you go out and buy another TV set, you put it on, you turn the dial to the same frequency, then suddenly you can see the program again, and you can continue having an experience. To me, that's how I see reincarnation. So if I believe I do reincarnate, right? So when if you say I would be born into a new body, I think the frequency of those cells would be the exact same as the soul that I have today. So the soul will continue on sending to me. So when I leave this body, of course the body is dead. But when I reincarnate, then actually I would match the frequency of my soul in order to continue living another life.
I find that for me it's very logical what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
And I love hearing this from an engineer.
Thanks.
And I love that you employ logic to understand these things, because it's just beautiful, because in the old paradigm, scientists would not deal with the mystery. No. But the quantum physicists were the first ones, as far as I know, that opened, there's something we don't understand, but we can feel it, we can sense it, and it makes sense to us, and we believe in it, and we trust it. I mean, Einstein said this beautiful thing, which I think is very important to remember at this stage of evolution. He said there's a big difference between the big question you have to ask yourself is whether you believe you live in a benevolent universe or not. Yeah. Because that will help shape your experience of the universe. So if you believe that life is good, you have a different interaction with life than if you believe life sucks and there is no God, and we're just a bunch of atoms and cells, and
that's right.
We can't influence anything.
But it's funny because we know that the way the brain works is that when it takes in information through our eyes, right, it actually draws on knowledge and the perceptions that we hold. So that's why we have it's usually difficult for us to see things in a new way. So let's say that something happens and we're looking at it and say, okay, I know this. This is just like the other day, same thing happening again. But the problem is, in order for the brain to use less, it wants to use less energy, right? So it's going to minimize the amount of energy it uses. Then it draws on knowledge and perceptions. So if we perceive the situation just like it was the same situation as yesterday, then we end up being victims of our past. We're not able to see new things. And so it's very important what we hold, the beliefs we hold are very important because our brain draws on those beliefs when it has to make sense of what's going on.
So what you're saying is that it's a good idea to be aware of one's beliefs.
Very important.
Yeah.
Both because, as I said, our subconsciousness is acting according to our beliefs because it runs those programs. That's all it can do. So if you do something, you say stupid, why did I do that again? Well, you're going to do that until you change that program. So I think Bruce Lipton makes a good description. He explains it very well because if you think about buying a computer, when you buy a computer, it's able to turn on the screen and you can look at it and then it runs, right? But it's no fun until you download Netflix and Messenger and whatever you need to put on it to use it. That's when it makes sense for you to have a computer, right? It's just like kids, when they're born into this life, they're able to digest and breathe and everything. But as we learn them things, they start living, right? So we actually put in these programs. So that's why it's very important who's actually among, who's bringing up kids, how are they actually telling them how life is, because that's the programs that they're going to hold.
And repeat and repeat
and repeat.
And create a reality that corresponds to those.
Yeah. Because our subconscious mind is, it's not logic, so it just does what is holds programs, right?
In that sense, it's very neutral. So we put in the programs; it does what we. The chemistry is produced, the energy is emanating, and what is this idea about attracting? Can you talk a little bit about,
but can I just add to this?
Yeah.
To this, because as sometimes we tell ourselves, "Why I'm so stupid? Why did I do this again?" And we blame ourselves, right? But you're not talking to your subconscious mind because it doesn't understand that language. The only way you can talk to your subconscious mind is by doing things over and over again. Then it'll believe, this is what we're going to do. So when you keep telling yourself that you love yourself, you do good things for yourself, you're loving and nurturing yourself, then it'll start believing that you love yourself. So we need to talk the language of the subconscious mind in order to change things. Now, when you go into hypnosis, you put your brain into these delta and theta frequencies. So, and that's the frequencies that you talk directly to your subconscious mind. So that's why when you go into hypnosis, somebody can put in programs that are different from what you hold now. And when you wake up in the morning, you're also in these delta and theta frequencies. So when you tell your things right when you wake up or when you go to sleep, right before you fall asleep, then that's going to be taken in by the subconscious mind. Remember, the kids are only operating in this theta and delta frequencies, and that's why they take in all this. And it's a great design because they learn about the environment that they're growing up in, and they take in really fast. They learn so quickly, and that's why we can use this knowledge to change the subconscious programs that we hold.
And when we change those, we emanate another energy, and that affects the energy around us.
Yeah. Also, remember, 95% of the time you're actually your subconscious mind is running your life 95% of the time, because you're busy thinking and planning and doing other things. Usually we can stay conscious for 5% of the time. I know Eckhart Tolle and others, they learn us how to be more in the now, and be aware. But it's we still need to be aware of what we hold in our subconscious mind, because it's running so much of our lives. Yeah.
So interesting and so fascinating. We could go on for hours, and I would love to do that. We've gone a little over time. I just have this question about the attraction part, because there's a lot of people have made this interpretation of the law of attraction, that it's equal to quantum physics. So just say a little bit about that before we end.
Well, the funny thing is that the law of attraction, to me, it's obvious, but it's not quantum physics. It's classical physics. So what I hold within, I know that everything has a frequency, because everything is made of these energy vortexes, right? So everything has a resonance frequency. It has its own frequency. Now, what frequencies I hold, I will pay attention to in my life. So when I meet something and I hold that same frequency, it will actually vibrate together, and you can say that the amplitude will enforce each other. So you will you will be aware of it. Does that make sense? So let's say that some frequency is approaching you, and you hold that same frequency. When they go into constructive interference, they will actually the amplitude will rise, right? That's why you will pay attention to it. If it's opposite, right, then it will eliminate each other, so it will go into zero. If they are in harmony and they will have the same frequency, right, you will actually make that signal stronger. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So what I hold within, I will notice in my world. And that's the law of attraction, because you can say that energy is everywhere. All these radio programs and TV programs, right where I'm standing, there's energy everywhere. But the thing is, you will only pay attention. You will only pay attention to the frequencies you hold within. It's like turning a dial. But you have, of course, you have love, and you have maybe some guilt and some, other feelings, right? But the thing is, you will attract what you hold within, because that's the only frequency you will pay attention to. And that's called constructive interference. Now, if you take an example like Dalai Lama or Nelson Mandela or people like that, when they were actually confronted with situations that would make everybody else angry, they didn't show anger. So you can say they didn't vibrate with that frequency. So they were able not to actually raise the amplitude and spread out the anger. You can say they eliminated it, and I think that's beautiful when you're able to stop the spread of anger, right? Because they didn't hold it within. So they didn't hold it, so they were not contributing to the anger that was spread out. If that makes sense, and from a classical physics point of view.
It makes so much sense, and it's also a beautiful note to end this interview on, because it gives us a recipe for changing the world. Yeah. That we eliminate the troubles within. We eliminate our own fear, our hate, our anger, our bitter, our suffering, and so we can help alleviate it outside of us, and also emanate a different energy, contribute to the whole spider web with a different energy, the energy of love.
Yeah. So loving ourselves is the best way to start. And I think the outside world is just a picture of what's going on inside all of us. So, and I think that's both intelligent and great, because we can then start by clearing out the things we don't want to hold within. That's going to change the world.
Henning, I really believe you are a hero.
Thank you.
I so enjoyed this interview, and I'm so happy I met you. And I didn't even meet you in person, but I just heard about your book. And I strongly recommend everybody to read it, because you have a wonderful, down-to-earth, very clear way of explaining these things. I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thank you
so
for
much.
asking me.
Yes.
Have you invited me in? That's been great to talk to you.
So we'll be in touch for sure. And all the people who were so kind to write here, I just want to say, yeah, Merete is saying important dialogue, and Boris is asking, has every feeling its own frequency, and is it the same for different people?
Yeah, okay, so you can say that I was talking about this carrying wave, right? So we each have our own carrying wave, that's what it's called. So love has one frequency and hatred has another frequency, but you cannot say that it's the exact same frequency. But the thing is that you can measure, for instance, a mom sitting with her newborn child, that is the unconditional love. And that is the highest frequency we can measure, both from her heart and from her brain. So that's why we are able to feel the love that's emanating from her, that she is emitting, right? Because we can feel this high frequency of love that she is emitting now, sitting with her newborn child. And unconditional love is the highest frequency we can measure.
And what about gratitude? Is that not
gratitude and feeling loved and doing things for others? That also has a high frequency, and also it's harmonic when you measure it.
Yeah. So whatever it is, we cannot go wrong with love, gratitude, devotion to this beautiful web we're part of, and thus we can create harmonious fields and harmonious waves, and contribute this way to the larger good. Thank you so much, Henning. I so appreciate. And now I think everybody needs to have a little yin break and think their own thoughts, and hopefully those are thoughts of love and positive vibrations. So thank you so much, and and thank you for all the people who listened. All right, bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.